So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarja. This is Monday Live, something we do every Monday at 3 o'clock to help us get through the pandemic and figure out what's on the other side. So the profiles of all of us is on mondaylive.org. Just as a reminder, views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do post comments and questions on the Zoom tools and complete the survey at the end. These slides are on mondaylive.org. So if there are any links that you want out of this slide deck, head over there. So agenda today, chit chat about what's going on. And then most of the show today, we're going to talk about what next for Monday Live. So we'll come back to that. But before we do that, a few slides to get us going. Roger's got quite a lot of material here on what Google is doing in terms of enterprise approach to digital building. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. Good subject. He also posted this, which is a lot of info here that very interesting. So I'm sure we'll talk about this as well, about what CFOs, this is all about what CFOs are thinking and doing moving forward. Ken Sinclair is focused on, I'm not quite sure the January thing, out of innovation. I'm sure he'll explain that in a second. And John Petsy's just highlighting news that I think a lot of us got this week, which is the NFMT 21 is not happening. And Jim Butler talking about some very specific technology and issues that we'll come back to. This is my slide. This is my mother. And the UK is getting its first doses of the vaccine. And my mother is getting hers as I speak. So
yeah, Tuesday is the first day.
Tuesday, well, okay.
They're doing it differently there than we are here in terms of priority, right? I heard.
Yeah, they're doing care homes first, and medical staff and things, and then they're moving on to the sort of over 80s after that.
Yeah, well, I signed the consent and everything else, so she's getting hers whenever. So, so where do we want to start? Do you want to expound on that a little bit more, Roger, because you probably know? Yeah.
Well, on the COVID thing, the injections and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, the UK seems to rush ahead and been the first guys to approve the stuff, and they're rolling out as from tomorrow. I think they're even going to get the army to help move it out. It's the Pfizer one, so it only needs to be refrigerated in like a normal home refrigerator at sort of 5 degrees. So it's not got to be frozen and everything, or below 18. But you do need to. I think the first injection kind of gives you about 70-odd%. And then if you have the second one, it takes you up to 95%. But there's a lot of reticence of people, about a third of people saying they won't have it because they feel it's been rushed through too soon. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's exciting. So you were put up on your slide
yeah.
Google.
There's a couple of things there. Yeah, so Google. So this was written by, I don't know whether anybody knows, but a lady called Kathy Farrington. She's in charge of Google's deployment of smart buildings. So she's based in the UK. She's responsible for it globally. A very, very, very smart lady, and her team. I've met with them a number of times, but here you can kind of see the levels that she's talking about, which we've pretty much talked about a lot of these, from, the ecosystem edge, security, device assurance. In fact, they've got a company that tests everything that sits on their OT network for their buildings, the networking and so on. And so they go through from the bottom upwards all the way through to business intelligence. Obviously, they're keen to try and get as much as they can directly connected through, but it's worth a read. It's The other thing that I saw today was that, or previously was that Bureau Happold are quite a large consultancy here, are actually working with Azure now to actually offer layouts of buildings and safe building stuff. So that, I guess it's just a continuation of what we talked about before with the big guys kind of getting involved and creeping into our industry one way or the other. But they make no bones about it. These guys know everything. They really do know that the pump comes on before the boiler. They know their stuff in Google. They've got a complete team that work on it. The other slide I put in was just something that was in actually the Sunday Times newspaper, which they had out. And it's I thought it was very applicable today. It's what CFOs, not particularly in our industry, but across the world, just looking at in terms of what they think they're going to be doing next year. They're looking and saying, yeah, they're going to be decreased turnover and stuff this year, but their near-term priorities are reducing costs and increasing cash flow. When you start going down the bottom, it's kind of saying, well, acquisitions, perhaps not, but we're seeing a lot of acquisition activity actually. Increased expenditure. Then on the other side, it's kind of saying, okay, how are you going to rebuild the top line, which is the red bars you see at the top there? Kind of saying products and services, they're going to launch new offerings, repurposed or pared down solutions, pricing strategies. They're two key things. They're non-financial opportunities. They're saying, organizational changes. And then the bottom ones there on the bottom are just saying organizational business processes. Unfortunately, the big negative on the right down there is land, business, buildings, and workspace infrastructure is where they're less likely to be investing. So you can download this infographic on the link that I put there, but I just thought it was kind of, as a general feeling of what people are thinking about from their perspective, looking at what we're talking about today.
That's interesting, Roger. I was just going to make a note on the Google thing that Richard Reed, that I think many of us know from Arup, is now on the Google team. Yeah, so that idea of Google coming in and hoovering up talent is true.
He joined about a year ago. Too.
Yeah, I'd like to add that James Dice had a podcast with a Google guy and one of their consultants recently, and it's pretty technical, talking about building information, how to model it, why they chose not to go with haystack or brick, but develop their own thing. If you're technically minded, I recommend it.
And it's global as well. I think Teresa will know this, that a couple of years ago was Alibaba started taking people from Tritium. So we lost some staff from Tritium and go across to Alibaba, which is like as you're probably aware, sort of an Amazon type equivalent in the US. Sorry, in China.
Okay, Ken, you're gearing up for January, presumably, on your automated buildings.
Yes, sorry about that. I was just off digging out something Brian had shared with us on our site on the Google, so I wanted to kind of drop that out. I'll drop it later. He's basically talking about his involvement with Google as well. So he'd kind of given us a heads up on this before as well. So I'll share that with the crowd. Yeah, so back to my slide. What we've been talking about is the procurement of innovation and putting a request out for it. And sort of our next chapter, or the next direction we're going, is we're actually looking for out of innovation. And what I'm kind of poking at there is innovation by itself is not all that significant. It is what we actually extract out of the innovation and what we actually create. And I think I'm calling for the industry to kind of take a look at that. And I go back and I talk a little bit about the current wars and how in my imagination, can you imagine if Edison had had all of the tools that we have, the DC tools that we have today, would we in fact still have this abortion of an AC grid that we have devastating our country? So that's kind of an interesting perspective. It was an incredible innovation, the light bulb, DC power, the whole ideas that Edison had of how this would play out, how it kind of went off on a political direction. And what I'm doing is I'm basically citing some parallels to that and saying, wow, I think we're almost in the same spot with data. And we basically have got governments and we've got large companies all trying to manipulate us to basically determine what our future is. But I think it's more than just our future. I think it controls our innovation. And so I'm asking us all to kind of take a look at what innovation is evolving and try and better understand what we can extract out of it. I did an interview with Control Trends on Saturday, and so I talk a little bit more about that. If you're interested, you can click on that. That's on the slide as well.
And that's a very interesting connection there to that. I saw that movie last year or the year before about the whole fight between AC and DC. That's an interesting, those are interesting dots you're connecting. Give us an example of one area. And I'm just curious, what comes to mind where you have all these different, as a layperson, give me an example of one area where you think there's so many different outsiders or behemoths sort of driving something in a direction. What's an example for me?
I think what we're just talking about before, Google's presence in the home, the Hey Google phenomena, and Alexa, the whole idea of talking to it. I don't know if you've actually played with that much of that technology in your house. I have a bit of it around. The way all of these devices sort of line up, and it's like, oh my God, they've solved so many problems. But of course, by solving the problems, they create other problems by basically making themselves the standard. And so now we're having this problem that we have evolving Google standards and evolving Amazon standards. And these guys are so big that they cross across countries, and this whole global kind of stuff that's going on. And I kind of think probably a lot of that went on in the rollout of power. Another example of that would be the telecommunications industry, that where we started out with analog phones and telephone poles and all of that. And we were so proud of our telephone system. In the early days, North America was probably a leader in that. And then what happened is the cell phone was invented, and people who hadn't invested in telephone poles and analog telephone exchanges leapfrogged us and basically put up cell towers and basically rolled out technology on top of an innovation. So I find that kind of interesting, in another parallel of how you have to be careful when you embrace these innovations and you put them in the hands of people, because they in fact control, and 100 years later you'll be faced with everything that rolled out of, for example, the current wars, and the fact that we have this grid that is spread widely. And could that have been done in a better way if in fact our buildings look more like spaceships and Teslas? And that's sort of kind of
that's really, really cool. I lived in Manila in the 80s. There was one phone per 1,000 households, and they leapfrogged us, just as you suggest, with more cell phone usage and data plan usage than the United States in a generation, or less than a generation. So that's cool.
How quickly things change, Bill. Remember, there's probably a Motorola phone. Anyone got one now?
Yeah, the big shoe phone, the Maxwell Smart shoe phone. The other thing I want to point out is, in these third world countries, the cell phone, then what trouble is, innovation begets innovation, and this stuff just grows really fast. But in the third world, a lot of the third world countries, they don't even have a monetary system. So what they do is they actually give out cell phones virtually for free because they want the people to have a cell phone, and they depend heavily on Wi-Fi rather than exchanges, basically cell companies. And they pull this together. It becomes your identity. It becomes your currency as well, as you basically build credit somehow. And all of a sudden it becomes your monetary system. So you can kind of see them leaping that. They're jumping into Bitcoin. And here we are still standing there looking at a telephone pole and looking at the grid connected to our buildings. We got to get with the program.
That's so cool, Ken. Thank you.
So moving on, John, do you want to give your thoughts about what you've observed?
Yeah, I highlighted 2 items this week. One, shows even for, the first third of next year being canceled. That affects our industry. That's something we've talked about since we got together. The other thing I posted was about the edge, and I thought that was interesting. That had been one of our focus topics over the last few weeks. And here's a major, news source, information source for the commercial real estate market, identifying that the edge is critical to the future of intelligent buildings. So I thought those were, just relevant to the suite of topics that we end up covering here. So.
Okay, thank you. And Jim Butler, you put up a few links.
Yeah, the theme for me this week is how buildings can contribute to human health by keeping corona away, and more generally promoting the health and productivity of the people in them. There's an ASHRAE webinar that'll be held on Thursday, if you're interested, with the latest advice from some of ASHRAE's experts. And there's a long academic paper, if you're more inclined in that direction, with 150 references related to this subject, as well as a New York Times article talking about hotels and cruise ships improving their HVAC systems.
Great, thank you. All right, so to our main part of the discussion. So Monday Live is a child of the pandemic. We started this, I remember sending out the first Zoom link to most of you saying, hey, I'd like to know what's going on in the industry. This is like in March, and we started to have of Zoom calls at 5 o'clock. The idea is we would have a beer or something so we can actually sort of be together. That evolved into Monday Live, with the first of which was April 27th. And so when I started this, I thought this is not going to go on for very long, and this is kind of a temporary thing. So I set up all of the mechanics and the repeating of the calendar and everything else to end the end of December, which is coming up. So on our planning call last week, I said, now, what are we going to do now? Are we going to continue this? What are we going to continue? How are we all feeling about all of this? And how can we actually continue Monday Live beyond 2020? Not that we're totally over the pandemic yet, but that's kind of the focus of this week's conversation, is where should we go now? And I would love to open it up to the members, but also would love to get your opinion out there, attendees, what you think, is good about this, what you think is not so good, and where you think we should focus or not focus, or whatever thoughts you have. So anybody want to start a conversation here?
I could just kick it off on John Petz's slide there. Is I think as people look out, they're going to have to think of newer ways of getting newer customers, because a lot of the things, the way you used to go to shows to actually talk to people, hunt people down and stuff, not as easy to do that now. And getting access to some of the decision makers is becoming harder. So you've got to find newer, innovative ways of getting that new business. Fine, you've got your contacts with the business you do today, but you've got to continue on growing your business. So you're going to have to find ways of doing that. A lot of the people who are running shows and running virtual ones now are actually offering, I guess what used to be kind of a thing where you could go on and sit down and people would have appointments with you. They're beginning to offer that as something online, so you can book appointments with people or, stuff like that. So people can just have to think about how they go out and get their new customers, beyond the ones they have at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll add, Anto, on that as we wrap up 2020. This is an opportunity for all of us, and we discussed it, but all the folks, all the attendees and so forth, to, be involved in creation with all of us right here and now, so that we can have some fresh ideas on what we all want to talk about, how we want to move forward. So don't be shy. Carol, thanks for that input there, but don't be shy and add whether you think this is valuable and we want to move forward, and how you could see it moving forward to add value in your world, or if you want to join the panel.
I like that.
I'll throw a comment out. Yeah, I want to emphasize we need to hear from the people who come and listen to us. I know for myself and some of the others, is that part of the question has been, can we offer something of value? There are very few hard answers that we can provide to people. I think we can provide insight and different viewpoints and whatever, but I think that's been a question. How can we offer value to the people who come to this call? And have we been accomplishing that? And do people want to see it continue? So.
One thing that occurs to me too, just like we had a bit of a learning curve and we tracked along as buildings closed down and talked about eventually what does reopening look like. And, now we've had a little bit of pendulum swing here and there in different segments. I think our world is going to change again as vaccines come online and people start, we start building up immunity throughout. Does that impact our industry or not? I'm not sure. Certainly something to track as we move forward on this whole thing.
And just to kind of add into or tag along with what Tracy was saying, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is what impact is COVID going to have on how we design buildings. And so I would like to hear from architects or MEPs or something like that. What impact is it having to the way they design, what owners are asking for? I just think that would be interesting. So maybe having a guest speaker on to talk about a little bit about that, because I think ultimately, our buildings might change, how they look or how they're accessed or their size or where they're located.
And we certainly saw, sorry, Anna, just real quick. We certainly saw, like in our business, we have, and I've used this phrase on here a couple of times, we have several pandemic accelerated projects. And the thing rolling through my mind is how much of that is going to stick long-term, for instance. And will we see those in our buildings going forward after vaccines come out? So. Sorry,
no, you're right. But just to build on Gina's and even Tracy's point just now, I think, like you said, Anto, originally we thought this was a short-term thing, and it'll come and it'll go and everything changes. But the point that Gina's making is this is a long-term thing, and now it's starting to impact the MEPs, the constructions, the architects, the designers. We're now starting to have an impact on the whole design of buildings and stuff. And I think that's where we thought it was coming and going. Now it's a long-term thing, and people in the design world are starting to think about this. So I think we should start to ask those folks, what are they talking about as far as new layouts, new operations, new ways that buildings are being used, and how can we help them?
Yeah. I've been in with some of the projects we're on involve UV technology in various ways, right? And I was in a school where they had lights mounted in every classroom, and it was a scheduled event that came on every night. It ran its cycle, and we're going to see schools designed like that. And we've been involved with other buildings where it's all part of the central HVAC system and circulation of the air. Is that going to be a normal spec item now in commercial buildings going forward?
Good point, Tracy. Are we going to see a CSI spec now that
Right.
kind of talks about that kind of thing. Yeah, good point.
And I think,
I'd like to make a comment as a curator of basically everybody on the screen here. This has been really useful for me because, believe it or not, it's very difficult to get you guys all in the same room and get you to talk. And when you're basically, all I'm doing here is eavesdropping, and even though Anto told me I can't, I basically extract amazing information, and I'm able to corral people into publishing good articles. And I'm all about trying to document the history. Mark and I think, have been working on that, and we're interested in where the industry has been and where the industry is going. And this is certainly a deflection point in history. And I think there's been this gigantic correction and a gigantic acceleration, as everybody's admitted. And I think what we need to do now is to try and document how the changes played out. I think how the changes are going to play out, the out of the innovation, as I'm calling it, is very necessary for me to blurb that out in many articles. Is UV technology going to take off? Is that going to be one of the answers? Somebody just throw into the chat there, is our virus is going to be taken seriously, and yeah, you bet. So, and virus detection, we got a whole bunch of technologies that haven't really quite rolled out yet. So I think there is a purpose for this. Whether this is the right format or not, we can talk about, but I think it's a great melding pot.
I think we, as an industry, well, first, let me say this. I think this has been excellent because, again, it's open lines of conversation that I don't think we as an industry have done all that well. And I think this forum does that well, whether it is COVID related or other things related, it really doesn't matter. The point is we are conversing. We're not exchanging emails. We're not reading people's articles. We're not doing this. It's an open conversation to include the audience as well. And as I see this, as we're kind of getting into 2021, is that unfortunately, the pandemic fatigue is going to continue. I don't think regardless, vaccine, no vaccine, who's going to take the vaccine, who's not, all this for the foreseeable future, the whole pandemic fatigue we all have experienced personally and professionally is going to continue. But that said, there's bright spots. I think, some of the things that we've talked about in the past and some of the things going forward is that I think we can all agree that data is the key to confidence in returning to work and managing our operations, making sure employees, occupants, tenants feel safe and secure. Also, kind of this came to me as I was on my morning walk over the weekend, was there's one word that I believe is going to dominate the built environment in 2021, and it's the word hybrid. We've talked about hybrid in the past. Hybrid meaning whether we're working from home or office or combination thereof, it's here, it's going to continue. Hybrid, how we manage and operate our buildings, from the workplace to tracking IAQ, occupancy, the balance between air distribution and all that conversation, and managing the energy side of this whole thing. And then the hybrid use of edge and cloud. So I think, we've got a lot to talk about in 2021, I believe. So I'd like to see us continue.
And Mark, the hybrid conference, throw that in there too.
Okay, there you go. Wait, I don't know anything about it, but anyway, sorry. Just got it. Sorry, the elevator just went to the top. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The hybrid conference where there's a studio audience and
yes,
you're working harder to reach people.
Yes.
Remotely,
So bottom line is, this is great conversation. There needs to be more live conversations like this going for the future of our industry. There you go.
I think the other thing I think is significant too is we would normally all be heading to Chicago shortly to AHR, and we'd be touching and feeling each other, and maybe even embracing each other in the old days. But that's not going to happen. And the fact that's not happening, I think that brings this virtual room that we're moving along. I think it becomes much more important, because I see Stacy once a year at AHR. John maybe a little more often than, but we usually have a little chit chat. We automated buildings. I'm sort of hurting from not having our sessions. I'm actually hurting from not bringing my young guns, my young mentors, and sitting there watching them. That was one, as I mentioned, was one of the highlights of my life. I think I'm going to attempt to try and pull that together into a Zoom. So I think we're all going to have to do that. We're going to have to take pieces of our business and digitalize them and bring them online. And how we all do that, if we share that information, I think will help us all evolve.
Steve,
And Ken, I think that
can I give
what
you
we're doing
a
there.
chance to jump in, Steve?
Yeah.
And Jim as well.
Yeah, thanks, Anto. So Ken, I have to take exception with one statement you made, which was that you find it hard to get us to talk. That is not a problem.
No, but Ken's
I want you
chased
to
me
write, because
for years for time. He's got more
Right.
time this year than he ever has.
I'm an old guy, and if you tell me something, I forget it. But if you
Yeah.
actually send me an email, the only way to ever get me to read anything about the industry is send it to me as an article, because I'm forced to read it.
Yeah, right. So what I wanted to share in terms of going forward, this whole thing was predicated on COVID and essentially identifying a problem and getting everybody together to see how do we deal with this problem. And so, here it is December, and the problem still exists. We've probably, in some respects, some of the information that has come out has been pertinent to helping a business here or a business there. But clearly, we've already identified that there's going to be additional changes to our industry as a result of COVID. So the COVID problem in and of itself hasn't gone away, as Mark pointed out. It's going to continue, and it's going to have various ways in which it affects our business. I guess my point is that this is just one problem of many that we could be talking about. And I think problems in and of themselves are the opportunities that build businesses. Bill, you had mentioned that one of the things you like about this group is there's a lot of leadership, proven leadership here on this panel. And so I think we're the right group to take on other problems from a leadership perspective and bring voice to them, and then pull in the participants to continue that dialogue. So just like we've advanced the discussions around COVID, we can advance discussions on other problem areas. So we've alluded to other problem areas, such as just the poor marketing of our industry, such that young people don't want to come work in this industry because they don't know what the heck we do. They can't even begin to appreciate how quote unquote smart our buildings are and how much technology is in them. And so they don't even think to come work here or apply for jobs. Well, that's a legitimate problem for our industry. What can we do to help facilitate or overcome that problem? My point is, I think we can easily identify 4 or 5 other significant problems that are worthy of our collective discussion in 2021.
Jim,
Besides COVID. And I think COVID continues to be something that we're going to need to continue to discuss, but there are a bunch of other areas that are worthy of our time and effort.
Jim?
I was going to mention about
Jim,
your
go
idea
ahead, Jim.
about training the industry and making it more attractive to other people, that one of the jobs that Ken Sinclair's education sessions we're doing at ASHRAE, and you've already at the traditional ASHRAE have the right community collected, but that I look at it, visually as being that small column or row inside the expo that was the controls alley. That was about the percentage of people that understood what controls can do for a building in all of ASHRAE. And what Ken was doing with his sessions, which seem to be growing every year. And I really appreciated the one that Gina participated in with me last year for inviting more women in too, is he was taking that funnel that is ASHRAE and bringing them to that let's talk about convergence, or in another way of saying, let's talk about smart building controls. That it was a real mechanism for, something you could really hard point to that was bringing new blood into our industry. And it's too bad that it's canceled for this year.
So Jim Lee, could you chime in?
I've been very excited to be part of the panel this year. I think it's been great. Going forward, though, I noticed that the participants on the participant list are very similar each time. And what I'm very interested in is figuring out how we can talk to those folks to see how we can grow the list and make Monday Live have a broader appeal. So I think that it's a little hard for us to do that in our own ecosystem. So it'd be very nice to hear from the outside. How could we get more people interested in Monday Live?
Yeah, that just to sort of back that up a bit, that it wasn't throughout this year and throughout doing the Monday Live, it wasn't really an objective of ours to have a big sort of audience. I mean, it was good to have more and more audience, and it's actually grown. But maybe one of the things you're saying is maybe in 21 we need to sort of change that and think about how to broaden it. And it's not just down to us, and it's obviously down to everybody in the industry.
Yeah, I think if we want to affect change, we have to talk to broader and more diverse groups of people than the industry leaders.
I hate to use the M word, but we need a little bit of marketing, I think, right? Behind this.
Right.
And I was going to say the same thing that Anto did. It was never our objective to really be prescriptive or to be providing advice or solving problems necessarily when we first got started. So this sort of evolved out of with the wrong premise in mind. I think if we go into it with intention, then our outcome could be a little bit different on that front, Jim. And I agree with you. We need to get it out more.
I see Joe Clark. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know. I've got a bit of a disconnect. I don't know that we should provide advice per se. I think the value of the panel is the discussions and what we think about and where we're going to. I'm not sure. I think there are good consultants and people who can do well at providing advice. I think our mission was, well, I could be wrong, but I thought our mission was just the discussion and the ideas that got generated out of that and some directions and stuff, rather than providing guidance and advice. I mean, there's plenty of places to go for that. I thought the audience was more, and we were more interested in just the discussions and the different thinkings that came out of it. That's the value I get out of it. I get the value I get is just listening to everybody's thought processes and ideas and stuff.
Yeah, I'd hate to get too produced, so to speak, in our content here. A lot of good, I didn't want to acknowledge, there's a lot of good suggestions coming through the chat group there.
Joe
maybe the function of Monday Alive
consult.
is, sorry, maybe the function of Monday Alive is that we are an organizational group. And basically what we should be doing is deciding what, like Jim Lee makes a request to have broader, more folks involved. I think we have to basically, that would be a particular broadcast or a particular Zoom. So maybe what we need to do is start putting a structure and then tagging people who would likely put this together, and also maybe start celebrating and displaying some of our younger folks. James Dice was mentioned. He's an amazing guy. And Nicholas has been doing some interesting stuff with digital twins. And so kind of pull some of that off. I'm sure cybersecurity would be another spin-off kind of production. So maybe this is the editing crew for the industry that puts together various programs. We become the new float in space AHR, and we basically provide virtual space where they provide real space. That was one of their biggest functions, is they provided this if you put, all you had to do for AHR was to put together an educational program that was sort of non-commercial, and they were happy to support it because it gave them, drew people to their event.
But one of the interesting things about this, about Monday Live, is the format and the fact that it's weekly and it's a little bit loose, which actually allows us to have the conversations that many of you have spoken about, it being a value, but it lacks the structure, right? So we have calls every Wednesday to think about what we're going to do next week, and it's always kind of a struggle whether we want to make it more rigid and more structured or keep it loosey-goosey. Which is
I don't think it's that. I don't know that it needs structure per se, but at least a topic or a focus or a subject matter that we can talk about. I mean,
which we've been doing, right? That's
we have been doing.
Yeah.
We never planned that ahead.
And part of the trick is, we all have day jobs too, right? So if we get into something that's too produced or too structured, it's going to become too much of a burden for some, and I'm worried about participation at that point.
Right, because with this, we basically just turn up with a big sort of theme and then have a discussion.
And maybe one of the things, Anto, is that's worked quite a few times is where we've had guests come on in a specific field. We've looked at a subject and then had kind of a subject expert come along and talk about that to generate some of the questions, and people can, as well as us, can ask them questions or have views about what they do.
Yeah, I think if we get out in front of our schedule a little bit more and better than we have, we said that several times in several meetings, we can't plan Monday's topic on the Wednesday before and expect other outside experts to have open calendars and be prepared and willing. So we definitely, now that we know that we're going to do this more than a couple weeks, maybe we can actually pull that off, right? So
I'd like to hear some thoughts on frequency, maybe shifting it to twice a month rather than 4 times. I don't have a dog in it. Well, I do kind of have a dog in the fight, but I'd love to hear some of the attendees, what their thoughts are on that. Maybe, I know, Anto, what was your thought on frequency?
Well, I'm very into sort of regular cadence, right? And cadence that sort of matches our everyday lives, right? Mm-hmm. And weekly kind of fits that, either weekly or monthly. And that's, I feel, quite strongly about that, because Monday Live, the name of it just sort of says it's always on Monday, right? But it is hard, and as we're starting to get busy, same with me, it's starting to not get difficult, but it will start to sort of overlap with things. So I don't know. I'd love to get the thoughts of the attendees.
Well, I think we need to have some resilience in that front, right? As things get busier, we're not all on this all the time, right? I missed the last week and a half. So, life happens around us. We just need a process to stand in for you, to get meetings started, to, if there's 6 of us or if there's 16 of us, it doesn't matter so much. I think some of the smaller audience days or smaller participant days have been interesting because they're a little bit more intimate and a little bit more content each time you speak.
There's also a possibility for us, basically, picking up what you said, of maybe having additional people in this group, right? And really sort of make it not expected to be there every week, right? So if there's like 18 of us and only half of us are there every week, then it's every other week, and there's 9 people, which is pretty good.
Jed's throwing out a good, I'm sorry.
A thing I'd like to mention is I've been big on this request for proposal concept, which we used in the past, and it worked really well. We could use that here as well, as we could basically just issue from Monday Alive a request for proposal as to what kind of programming, and let the people put together a little paraphrase thing, and also if they're willing to do it. Like, I'm willing to put together next Monday, and here's what I want to talk about. And then this group here basically says, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And so we become just like a body that says, yeah, no, you know, that fits with our Monday Alive manual. We do have a manual.
Chad just suggested something that's kind of intriguing. Sort of, I don't know how to describe it. Sort of interweave them. So you have 1 week of informal and 1 week of strict topic with guests, something along those lines.
I like that.
Yeah, me too. I think that gives us the runway to get someone ahead, 2 weeks ahead.
That's called a hybrid, right, Mark?
Hybrid. There you go, Mark.
I heard something Ken said, and I just want to repeat it to see if I heard it right, because I think there might be an idea in there, is like every 6 months having a bigger event that we're always working towards, that each one of these weekly meetings would contribute to something that would happen and that we would really get the technology and the marketing together for that 6 month, you know, the big Monday Live, which happens in July or twice a week, and that we are circling around the same topics. And Prism, you know, it would be easy for maybe one time have it longer and more inclusive. Anyway, that's kind of what I thought I heard Ken say when he said we would be the editors, and we would engage other people to help us promote, but they wouldn't promote every week. They might promote for this.
But we could do that because I mean we'll start to have real events. I mean there'll be an AHR 2022, so maybe that's kind of an episode of Monday Live. Is that what you're sort of saying?
Well, what about, I think we're going to need some virtual ones to get from here to there. I think we're hurting for not having our big events. And by the way, what's happening with the Niagara, Therese? So that seems like it's just in hold, but everybody's got a session like that is in hold. Maybe this is the opportunity every other week or something they get to do it, and at least an introduction to what they're doing, just to try and kind of keep some continuity going. I think we're used to.
Delta had an interesting one. If anybody else participated in that last week.
Which, I'm sorry, which was? I'm just.
Delta had their user group meeting.
Delta, yes. Okay, yeah. All right, sorry.
Yes. I think Brian Turner saying maybe we're starting to over-engineer this. Which is true. Because
he's right.
Yeah, he's right.
Don't be cynical, Turner. Come on, man.
I think the challenge is, as Tracy said, is, you know, everybody's got a day job, and put in the effort and try and organize stuff in between times starts to detract from it, and it does become a challenge. And I think people will get busier. Certainly in the short term, I think people are playing catch up in the industry, and everybody seems to be busy again. Whether that changes, and if it does change and you're not so busy, people are going to be busier trying to get themselves busy. So I don't see much, you know, bandwidth for people to be able to spend a lot of time in putting stuff together.
Yeah, if you think about it, on a 40-hour week, we're already putting in 5% of our week on this, right? So it starts to go up from there.
40 hours only, Tracy. Come on.
I know that's a Monday and Tuesday for me. I get it.
I guess this is why I brought up the idea of the problems, because if you're putting an agenda together and you said, okay, for the month of January, we're going to focus on this topic, i.e. problem, and then February, it's going to be this, and March and so on. And if you get it done sooner, if after 2 weeks of effort, you sort of exhausted it, you just move up to the next topic. But I think any one topic has the opportunity. I mean, look at how much time we spent on COVID, for God's sakes. So
I'm because Brian Turner's making all sorts of comments. I'm going to pull him in just like that. Say your piece, Brian.
That's not fair, Anto. I prefer to text. No, I was just saying, you know, part of the reason that I join is to hear all of you guys talk. I don't have, it's rare occasion that I have an opportunity to speak one-on-one with any of you. And I'm on meetings all day long. So the reason that I choose to come here is not necessarily that I'm learning anything new from a market perspective, but what I am learning is your guys' individual takes on what's actually going on. And so, and that's what's kept me coming back. It's not that talking about Google's DBO is something I didn't already know about, but hearing your perspective on how that impacts your part of the world, your part of the industry, just your own way of thinking about it is valuable to me. So I think, you know, you do have a danger of over engineering something that's good as it is. And I actually think does provide value in an ongoing way. And I think that the more you communicate and the more you guys can keep kind of the current topic at hand, I think you will grow your audience. I do think you could probably do some things on the marketing side with you know, Dice and you know, Nicholas and get them to maybe cross promote this Monday's live. Because I do think you guys provide a different, this particular session provides a different value than the podcast areas are going. And so that's all. I just don't want you guys to get too far in the weeds in changing something that's actually working.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I brought you in. Correct us.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Actually, viewpoint. I like the flexibility, and yeah, we wander from time to time and we're scattered about, but that's part of the appeal as well.
Well, I think the format actually keeps us current, right? Because, you know, the lack of preparation or so, just coming on and talking, I'm always going to be talking about what happened this week, last week, what I heard, what I'm, you know, who I'm talking to. If you try to put structure on that, I'm going to put all sorts of crazy PowerPoints, which, you know, may or may not be relevant. I'd rather just talk about what happened for the week.
That could be our sanity test. If at any point any one of us feel like they have to put a slide together, we've gone too far.
Gone too far. Jump the shark.
Where it's a slide too far at that point. So.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of the trend of being more agile and being, you know, that's technology is doing that, and this kind of enables us to do this, to actually be not to have to prepare for a conference in 6 months or in a number of months. We can just sort of iterate one week to another, and we've actually done a number of times. We've done sort of follow-up topics from the previous one. That's been quite often quite interesting.
And it's a sign of the times too. I think, you know, the COVID thing and everything else is causing us to be a lot more dynamic than we would have been without it, right? In some context, without COVID, would this thing have been successful? Maybe not.
And I was going to say this earlier, I don't think we're done, right?
No.
You know, even as vaccines are coming on and let's all hope that they're successful. We are talking about a virus, and viruses do a couple of things really well, I should say. One of which is mutate. And who knows what we're dealing with next year, and what are next year's vaccines looking like, and how successful are they? You know, if you think about it, even with just the flu, from time to time, there's been, you know, a version that got a little nasty and scary on us. So we're likely, and this comes from Carol's comments from way back, but we're likely have gone through this huge learning curve as a society, and we'll have to reapply it going forward because there'll be other things that we'll have to react to this way. So, you know, this probably isn't a dead topic altogether going forward, even with successful vaccines on this go around.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it through the period, right? It's what's changed is the rate of change, right? The rate of change of things that were on a path have changed increasingly. And so having a weekly discussion, and I think that's why weekly still works, Anto, because it is still a high rate of change that we're facing.
Don't underestimate also what you know or what you see is not what everybody sees all the time. They got different roles, and they're learning perhaps some of the stuff, you know, that we think is run of the mill, but actually is stuff that a lot of people don't actually see all the day, you know, that maybe the Ken sees or Mark is looking at, and they don't always get the opportunity to spend that time looking at some of that stuff, and is pretty useful to actually just put out there so people can share, you know, share and see it as well.
I think that was the key part of Brian's perspective is the context and the perspective we may see something happening, but we may not be seeing it from the same perspective, and this enables us to give a place to discuss that. So I think that's good.
Yep.
I've enjoyed getting everyone's individual take on it from their own business perspective too. Not just what's in the news, in other words, just what's going on with our businesses on a week by week basis. That's incredibly helpful to understand, you know, one of a couple things, either, hey, you're not in this alone, we're going through the same thing, or B, what the hell are you talking about? We're not seeing that, that's not happening to us, you know, kind of thing.
So we have 3 minutes left. Any sort of final sort of conclusions of this discussion from anyone?
Did we cover anything about helping the BAS in 2021, or did we bypass that?
Well, I think the help is to continue this part, at least some aspect of this part of it. And if we're going to get anything structured, we got to do more planning.
I think the problem with that question, I know, is that there's an implication that there is an answer to that question. Right? That this is the answer. And I think what I'm hearing here is that is not the case. It's actually just us evolving, whatever it is. And actually just sort of, rather than just doing it in our own silos, we have this platform that we can compare notes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, it goes back to what Brian was saying earlier, is that, you know, we may imagine things that are potentially going to happen next year, or think about them and sharing them, and then it's for other people to actually at least chime in. If you actually think something's happening, like, you know, new construction will stop, then you can say that and other people will have a view on it. But it's getting that idea out, or you know, your view on it, that kind of opens the discussions up.
Okay, that is great. This has been a great conversation, and we've got a couple more before we wind up for the year, and then we'll figure out how 2021 will continue. But basically, somewhat similar to this format, but maybe tweaked, and hopefully we can get a broader support from more people and make it more valuable. So I think that's a nice place to wrap it for now. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Brian, for being pulled in and
being flexible.
Being flexible. Right. So, okay, thank you. Video will be up by the morning, and have a great week, and talk to you next week on Monday Live. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.